The silent void far beyond the edges of human exploration, the Araxian Confederation stood as a monument to progress. 14 species joined in harmony across 37 star systems, their technology centuries beyond anything Earth had achieved. They had conquered disease, mastered gravity, and built cities that floated among the clouds of gas giants. None of that mattered now. Senior diplomat Tylo's 4 hands trembled as he watched another star disappear from the holographic display. The Void Cascade had claimed its 6th system this month. The phenomenon defied explanation, a spreading darkness that consumed light, matter, and eventually entire worlds. "How long until it reaches the homeworld?" Tylo asked, his outer eyes blinking rapidly in distress. Science Director Revenar's skin shifted to a pale blue. 42 days if the acceleration continues at current rates. The Grand Council chamber fell silent. 14 representatives from the most advanced civilizations in this arm of the galaxy, and not one had a solution. "The distress signals?" asked High Counselor Livex. Communications Officer Neri touched her temple interface. "We've transmitted on all quantum frequencies to every spacefaring civilization within range. 2,417 distinct civilizations have acknowledged receipt." "And the responses?" Neri's voice grew quiet. "None have offered assistance." It wasn't surprising. The Void Cascade represented an unknown threat of immense power. The advanced logical frameworks that guided most galactic civilizations would calculate the risk as too great, the probability of success too small. Why sacrifice resources fighting an enemy that couldn't be understood? Tylo sank into his seat. The Araxians had explored space for 9,000 years, yet they might be witnessing the final days of their civilization. 3 days later, Tylo was jolted awake by an urgent notification. Rushing to the communications center, he found Neri, staring at her screens in disbelief. "We received a response," she whispered. "From whom? The Zentari Alliance? The Murian Collective?" "No." Neri's voice held confusion. "From Earth." Tylo blinked all 4 eyes. "Earth? The primitive world in the spiral arm. They barely have interstellar capability." Nevertheless, they responded. Neri activated the message. A flat video transmission appeared, primitive by Confederation standards. A human woman stood on what appeared to be the bridge of a spacecraft. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, and her uniform looked simple, but functional. "This is Captain Song of the United Earth Fleet. We received your distress call, describing the Void Cascade phenomenon. We've analyzed the data you shared and assembled a response fleet. Help is on the way. Expected arrival at the coordinates you provided in approximately 16 days. Please send any additional information that might assist our preparation. Earth stands with the Araxian Confederation in this crisis." The message ended, leaving the room in stunned silence. 16 days, Tylo finally managed. "That's impossible. Even with their most advanced drives, it would take humans months to reach us." "They must be exaggerating their capabilities," Revinar said, his skin rippling with dismissive patterns. "Or, they've advanced more rapidly than our last intelligence suggested," countered Neri. Tylo studied the human's face again. There was something in her eyes, a determination that seemed almost illogical given the circumstances. "Have we received any other responses?" he asked. "None," Neri confirmed. "We've received acknowledgements of our message, but explicit refusals to intervene. Most cite insufficient probability of successful intervention or unacceptable risk factors. Yet the humans respond immediately," mused Tylo. "Curious." Exactly 16 days later, alarms sounded throughout the Araxian defense network. Ships were appearing at the edge of the system, 7 vessels of unfamiliar design. "Are they using some form of teleportation technology?" Revinar demanded, rushing into the control center. "No," replied Defense Commander Vex. "They appear to have developed a new form of faster-than-light travel we haven't encountered before." The lead ship established communication immediately. "Captain." Zong's face appeared on the main display, looking somewhat tired but resolved. "Araxian Confederation. This is the Earth vessel Horizon. We've brought our best scientists, engineers, and a few thousand very determined humans. We understand the Void Cascade has accelerated. Please direct us to where we can dock and coordinate our response efforts. High Counselor Livex stepped forward. Captain Song, we appreciate your response, but I must ask, why did you come when no other civilization would? The human's expression registered surprise, as if the question itself was strange. Because you asked for help, she said simply. And because if it were Earth in danger, we'd hope someone would answer our call too. Tylo felt something shift in his understanding of the universe. In 9,000 years of space exploration, the Araxians had encountered countless civilizations with superior technology, greater resources, and more extensive knowledge. Yet when extinction loomed, it was these humans, barely a century into their interstellar exploration, who had answered. As Captain Song's team prepared to transfer to the Araxian command station, Tylo wondered what other surprises these strange creatures might bring. Perhaps there was something valuable in their primitive emotionality after all, something the logical frameworks of advanced civilizations had calculated away long ago. Hope, perhaps. Or courage in the face of impossible odds. Whatever it was, for the first time since the Void Cascade had appeared, Tylo felt the faintest glimmer of possibility that tomorrow might come after all. The unlikely saviors, the arrival of the human. Ships caused a commotion throughout the Araxian homeworld. Crowds gathered at viewing platforms, their four eyes wide with curiosity as the Earth vessels docked at the orbital station. The ships weren't beautiful by Confederation standards, blocky, utilitarian, with visible repair patches, and none of the elegant biomechanical design that marked advanced civilization. They looked like they might fall apart any moment, whispered a young Araxian to her parent. Diplomat Tylo tried to maintain his professional composure as he waited in the docking bay. Behind him stood representatives from each of the Confederation species, their skin colors shifting through patterns of anxiety and skepticism. The airlock hissed open. Captain Ji-Hai Song stepped through first, followed by her team of 12 humans. They were smaller than most Araxians, with only 2 arms and 2 eyes. Their skin didn't change color to express emotion. By any measure used in the Confederation, they appeared primitive. Yet there was something in how they carried themselves, a quiet confidence that seemed out of place for a species that had achieved spaceflight less than a century ago. "Welcome to Araxia Prime," Tylo said, performing the traditional greeting gesture with his upper hands, while his lower hands remained in respectful positioning. "I am Senior Diplomat Tylo. The High Council awaits your delegation." Jihye nodded and stepped forward. "Thank you for the welcome. We've brought our best minds and whatever resources we could gather quickly." As they walked through the gleaming corridors of the station, Tylo noticed the humans staring in wonder at the surrounding technology. One of them, a stocky man with kind eyes, reached out to touch the living wall material, then quickly pulled his hand back. "It's all right," Tylo assured him. "The walls respond to touch. They're a silicon-organic hybrid." "Amazing," the man said. "I'm Dr. Kwan, by the way, lead physicist." Tylo blinked in surprise. "You're the lead physicist for your entire planet?" Dr. Kwan laughed. No, just for this mission. Earth has thousands of physicists. Yet you don't share a unified consciousness. Each works independently." "That's right," Ji-Hai interjected. "We find different perspectives help us solve problems faster." This concept seemed wildly inefficient to Tylo, but he kept his thoughts to himself. The High Council chamber hushed as the humans entered. 14 beings from 14 worlds sat in a perfect circle, their seats adjusted to their various physiologies. In the center, a holographic display showed the approaching Void Cascade, a growing darkness consuming stars and planets in its path. High Counselor Livex rose from his seat. 8 feet tall with iridescent scales that shifted from blue to purple, he cut an imposing figure. "Captain Song of Earth," he began, his translator converting his harmonic speech to standard language. "While we appreciate your response to our distress call, we must express confusion. Your civilization is classified as Category 3, early spacefaring. You have no colonies beyond your home system. Your energy utilization is a fraction of ours. What assistance could you possibly provide against a threat that has defied the analysis of the Confederation's greatest minds?" Ji-Hai stepped forward. Into the circle, seemingly unintimidated by the gathering of vastly more advanced beings. Counselor, with respect, sometimes the newest eyes see what experienced ones miss. We've analyzed the data you sent and have some theories about the cascades. Nature. She nodded to Dr. Quan, who projected a simple 3D model from a handheld device. It looked almost childish next to the sophisticated Araxian technology. We believe the void cascade isn't consuming matter, it's displacing it into another dimensional phase, Quan explained. Our calculations suggest it's a natural phenomenon, but one that could potentially be disrupted at its origin point. Science Director Revenar's skin flashed with patterns of dismissal. We considered phase displacement. The energy requirements to counter such a phenomenon would exceed the output of 10 star systems. Not necessarily, countered a quiet woman from the human delegation. I'm Dr. Lee, Quantum Engineering. We've been working with dimensional phasing on a small scale. If we're right about the cascade's nature, we might be able to trigger a collapse from within rather than trying to stop it from outside. Murmurs filled the chamber. The Araxians had considered the cascade impenetrable. Why did none of the other civilizations respond to our call? Asked a counselor from the methane-breathing Vex species. We received acknowledgements from over 2,000 worlds. Captain Hive's expression hardened slightly. We've been asking ourselves the same question, so we checked. She nodded to a tall human who stepped forward with another device. I'm Communications Officer Park. After receiving your distress call, we sent our own messages to several major civilizations asking about their response plans. He displayed the messages they'd received. One after another, they said essentially the same thing. Probability of successful intervention, 0.02%. Risk to intervention forces, 99.8%. Logical conclusion, non-intervention. They all ran the numbers, Jihi said quietly, and decided you weren't worth the risk. The council chamber fell silent. And you? Asked Livex finally. Did humans not calculate the odds? Jihi looked around at her team, then back to the council. We did. They're not good. But humans have a saying. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. We couldn't just listen to your call for help and then turn away. That is not logical, stated the representative from the Crystalline Gev Collective. No, agreed Jihi. It's human. Tylo watched the faces of the council members. Many displayed patterns of confusion or dismissal, but a few showed something rarer: thoughtfulness, consideration of ideas outside their logical frameworks. What exactly do you propose, Captain Song? Asked Livex. Jihi nodded to her team. With your permission, we'd like to work with your scientists to develop a disruption device that could be deployed at the heart of the cascade. We'll need resources. Hand assistance understanding your more advanced technology, but we believe we can find a solution. And if we calculate that your plan has a 95% chance of failure? Asked Revenar. Jihi's response was simple. Then we have a 5% chance of success, which is 5% more than doing nothing. As the humans began explaining their theories in more detail, Tylo felt an unfamiliar sensation building in his chest. The logical part of his mind told him these primitive beings couldn't possibly succeed where the Confederation had failed, yet something else, something older and deeper than logic, made him want to believe. The unconventional tactics. 3 days after the humans' arrival, the Joint Research Center buzzed with activity. The Araxians had provided their most advanced laboratories and equipment, though the humans often seemed overwhelmed by the technology. Still, they adapted quickly, finding ways to integrate their simpler approaches with the Confederation's sophisticated systems. Lieutenant Tae-Won Kim hunched over a workstation, his fingers dancing across holographic controls as he modified simulation parameters. For the 12th time that day, the simulation failed, the virtual representation of the void cascade continuing its inexorable expansion despite their attempted disruption. Perhaps we should consider a different approach, suggested scientist Mal, her forehands adjusting settings with practiced precision. The Council believes direct intervention is impossible. Tae-Won rubbed his tired eyes. The Council might be right, but impossible just means no one's figured it out yet. Across the lab, Dr. Li had disassembled an Araxian quantum manipulator and was rebuilding it with modifications that made the watching engineers nervous. Captain Ji-Hai moved between workstations, encouraging her team despite mounting evidence that their task might truly be impossible. "Time for a break," she announced, noticing the exhaustion on her people's faces. 10 minutes, everybody stretch your legs." As the humans stepped away from their stations, Science Director Revenar entered the lab, his skin rippling with patterns of concern. "Captain Song," he said, "the void cascade has accelerated again. We now have less than 28 days before it reaches the homeworld." Ji-Hai's expression remained steady, though Tylo, who had learned to read human faces, could see the worry in her eyes. "Then we'll work faster," she said simply. Revenar's outer eyes blinked in the Araxian expression of frustration. "Your team has produced 17 theoretical models. All have failed in simulation. The High Council is considering evacuation of key personnel to our furthest colonies." "Abandoning the homeworld?" Tylo asked, shocked. "Preserving what we can," Revenar corrected. "The logical choice when faced with inevitable destruction." From across the room, Taewon looked up. "What about mining ships?" Everyone turned to him. "Your mining operations in the gas giants," he continued, walking over to them. "They use dimensional phase drills to extract deep materials, right?" Revenar's skin shifted to a confused yellow. "Yes, but what relevance?" "We've been thinking." "Too big," Taewon interrupted, moving to the central display. "We've been trying to contain or deflect the entire cascade, but what if we target its focal point instead?" He pulled up schematics of the Araxian mining equipment, making quick modifications. Dr. Li joined him, immediately grasping his idea. "The phase drills create localized dimensional bubbles," she explained, excitement building in her voice. "If we reversed the polarity and amplified the effect, you could create a counterphase that might disrupt the cascade's coherence," finished Dr. Quan, hurrying over. Within minutes, the entire human team was gathered around the display, speaking rapidly over each other, suggesting modifications and improvements. The Araxians watched in confusion, unused to such chaotic collaboration. "This is how humans work best," Ji-Hai explained to Tylo. "A little messy, but effective." After 2 hours of intense work, Taewon presented their plan to the gathered Araxian scientists. "We modify your mining ships with reversed phase generators," he explained. "Then we send them directly into the heart of the cascade, where they create a counterphase bubble. If our calculations are correct, it should disrupt the cascade's quantum structure and cause it to collapse." The room fell silent. "That would require pilots to fly directly into the cascade," said Revenar slowly. "Nothing has returned from within it. The ships and all aboard would be lost." "Not necessarily," countered Dr. Li. "If the disruption works, there's a chance the ships could escape during the collapse." "What chance?" asked Taelo. The humans exchanged glances. "About 13%, admitted Dr. Quan. Revenar's skin shifted to deep blue, the color of absolute rejection. Completely unacceptable. No rational being would volunteer for such a mission. "I would," said Taewon quietly. "As would I," added Dr. Li. One by one, each human in the room voiced their willingness to go. Revenar stared at them in disbelief. "You would knowingly undertake a mission with an 87% probability of death? To save billions of lives," Ji-Hai replied. "Yes." The next day the plan was presented to the High Council. The chamber was tense as Taewon explained their proposal, with holographic displays showing the modified mining ships and their projected path into the cascade. When he finished, councillors from 14 worlds began speaking at once, their translated voices filling the chamber with objections. "This plan violates basic safety protocols. The energy requirements would drain our reserves. The phase technology could create a second cascade if miscalibrated." High Councillor Livex raised a hand for silence. "Lieutenant Kim, while your creativity is commendable, this council cannot approve such a dangerous and speculative plan. The risk of failure is too high and the cost in lives is unacceptable." Taewon looked to Captain Ji-Hai, who stepped forward. "Councillor," she said, her voice calm but firm, "what is your current alternative?" Livex hesitated before answering. "Evacuation of essential personnel and knowledge to our outer colonies. Approximately 8% of our population could be saved. And the rest? Ji-Hai pressed. The chamber fell silent. Sometimes, Ji-Hai continued, you need to try the impossible because it's the only option left. From the back of the human delegation, Communications Officer Park spoke up. On Earth, we have a story about a man who finds a beach covered in thousands of dying starfish washed ashore. He begins throwing them back into the ocean one by one. Someone tells him, you can't save them all. What difference does it make? As he throws another back, he says, it made a difference to that one. The simple story hung in the air of the technologically advanced chamber. We understand the risks, Ji-Hai concluded. We accept them willingly, but we need your help to modify the ships. After a long moment, an elderly counselor from the aquatic Nor species spoke. I have lived 267 years by making logical choices, but I find myself wondering what logic is worth if it leads us to abandon billions of our people without even trying to save them. Slowly, more counselors began to voice support. Not all. Some maintained that the plan was foolish, a waste of precious resources that could be used for evacuation. But enough agreed that Livex finally nodded. Very well. The Council approves the allocation of resources for this attempt. As they left the chamber, Tylo caught up with Ji-Hai. Your people continually surprise us, he said. You know that even if this works, those who fly into the cascade will almost certainly never return. Ji-Hai's eyes were solemn. We know. Then why? She considered for a moment. Because every life matters. Because we can't stand by when others suffer. Because sometimes being human means doing the right thing, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Tylo watched as the humans immediately began organizing their mission, assigning roles, planning for contingencies. They worked with the energy of people who believed they could change the impossible, not the resignation of those facing certain doom. For the first time since the void cascade appeared, he felt something new taking root alongside his fear, a strange, irrational hope. Into the darkness, the launch bay hummed with tension as 12 ships prepared for departure. 7 were crewed by humans, 5 by Araxian volunteers who had stepped forward despite the Council's warnings. The vessels had been modified according to the humans' specifications, mining equipment reconfigured into phase disruptors, power. Cores enhanced beyond safety protocols. Lieutenant Taewon Kim ran his hand along the hull of his ship, the Pathfinder. It wasn't pretty anymore. The elegant Araxian design was now cluttered with additional equipment, power conduits snaking across the surface, like metal veins. She'll hold together, said Engineer Navia, his 4 hands making final adjustments to an external panel. Though, I still think you're all insane. Taewon smiled. That's what my mother says about most of my decisions. Across the bay, Captain Ji-Hai moved from ship to ship, speaking briefly with each crew. She wouldn't be going on the mission. Someone needed to coordinate from command, and as the ranking officer, the responsibility fell to her. Taewon could see it ate at her to send others while staying behind. When she reached him, her expression was solemn. All systems check out, Taewon reported before she could ask. We're as ready as we'll ever be. Ji-Hai nodded, then surprised him by pulling him into a quick hug. Come back if you can, Lieutenant, she said quietly. That's an order. Yes, ma'am. Communications Officer Ha-Jun Park approached, carrying helmets for both of them. His normally cheerful face was tight with concentration. Final comms check. Complete. We should maintain contact until we hit the outer boundary of the cascade. Engineer Mi-Su Lee joined them, her small frame nearly hidden beneath the bulky environmental suit. Phase disruptors are at 98% alignment. It's the best we can do with the time we had. Around them, similar conversations played out as the mission. Teams completed their preparations. There were no grand speeches, no dramatic farewells. Just quiet determination and the occasional laugh that held more nervousness than humor. Diplomat Taylor watched from the observation deck, joined by Science Director Revenar and a handful of other Araxian officials. I still believe this mission is doomed to failure, Revenar said, his skin cycling through patterns of doubt, yet I find myself hoping to be proven wrong. Tylo's outer eyes blinked in agreement. They are remarkable creatures, these humans. The countdown began. 1 by 1. The ships powered up, their engines glowing with energy that bordered on unstable. Launch doors opened to the blackness of space, and in precise sequence each vessel departed. Hajun settled into the communication station aboard the Pathfinder, establishing the link to command. "All ships reporting ready, Captain," he told Hi. Beginning approach to the Cascade perimeter. On the main view screen, the Void Cascade loomed ahead, a vast darkness that seemed to absorb not just light but reality itself. At its edges, stars flickered and distorted as space-time itself warped under its influence. "It doesn't look natural," Misu whispered from her engineering station. "It looks hungry." Taewon guided the Pathfinder into formation with the other ships. "Stay focused, remember the approach vector. We need to reach the focal point for the disruptors to have maximum effect." The 12 ships moved forward in tight formation. As they neared the outer boundary of the cascade, sensors began to malfunction. Gravitational readings fluctuated wildly. Radiation alarms blared and were silenced. "Entering the outer distortion field in 30 seconds, Taewon announced. "Brace for transition." The moment they crossed the boundary, reality itself seemed to twist. The view screen filled with impossible colors. Hajun gasped as his console sparked, communications becoming garbled. "Seek command. This is Pathfinder," he managed. "We've entered the outer layer, experiencing severe distortion effects." Hi's voice came back broken and stretched. "Read you. Maintain course." Then silence. One of the Araxian ships suddenly veered off course, its engines flaring bright against the darkness. "Sunseeker is breaking formation," Hajun reported, adjusting communications to the interfleet frequency. "Captain Lorex, what's happening?" The Araxian captain's voice was tight with fear. "Safety protocols are forcing an automatic retreat. We can't override." 2 more Araxian vessels followed, their advanced systems unable to cope with the reality distortions, failsafes triggering emergency. "Withdrawals. Should we abort?" Misu asked, eyeing her own failing systems. Taewon's grip tightened on the controls. "No, we continue." 9 ships remained, pushing deeper into the cascade. The darkness pressed in around them, sensors failing completely. Now they were flying blind, guided only by their calculated trajectory, and whatever visual references remained. "Hull integrity at 82% and falling," Misu reported, her voice steady despite the sweat beading on her forehead. "The phase disruptor is starting to destabilize." Another ship disappeared from sensors, not retreating but simply gone. Then another. 7 ships remained, continuing into the heart of darkness. Hajun worked frantically at his station, trying to maintain contact with the other vessels. "I've lost contact with Guardian and Horizon. Wait, I'm picking up an emergency beacon from Defender. They've lost power but are still on course." The Pathfinder shuddered as something struck the hull. Not debris, there was nothing solid here, but some kind of energy discharge from the cascade itself. "It's fighting back," Misu whispered. "Like it knows what we're trying to do." Warning lights bathed the bridge in red. Systems failed one after another. Taewon manually adjusted their course, compensating for the failing engines. "We're approaching what we think is the focal point," he announced. 5 minutes to target." Another violent shudder ran through the ship. A support beam crashed down, narrowly missing Hajun. "Hull integrity at 47%, Misu called out. "We're losing containment on the phase disruptor." "Can you hold it together for 5 more minutes?" Taewon asked. Misu's hands flew across her console. "I'll try, but the power couplings are failing. We need more energy to stabilize the reaction." Taewon made a quick calculation. "Divert power from life support and engines." "That would leave us without enough power to escape after deployment," Hajun pointed out. "One problem at a time," Taewon replied. "Make the adjustment." The lights dimmed as power was redirected. The temperature on the bridge began to drop. Immediately, their breath fogged in the increasingly cold air. 3 minutes to target, Taewon announced. "Any word from the other ships?" Hajun shook his head. "Nothing clear. I think we're alone now." The darkness outside was complete. The view screen showed nothing but an absence so profound it hurt to look at it. Yet somehow Taewon could sense they were nearing their destination, a wrongness at the heart of the wrongness. "1 minute," he said quietly. Misu's voice was calm despite the frost forming on her console. "The disruptor is as stable as I can make it, but we'll only get one shot at this." The ship groaned around them, systems failing faster now. The hull would not hold much longer. 30 seconds. Hajun suddenly straightened. "Wait, I'm picking up something." Another ship approaching from the port side. Through the view screen they could just make out the outline of another vessel. The Horizon, thought lost minutes ago. Its hull was scored and damaged, but its engines still burned. "They made it," Taewon breathed. "Communications." Hajun shook his head. "Nothing." 10 seconds to deployment, Misu announced. The Pathfinder shuddered one final time. A terrible groan of metal pushed beyond its limits. "Now!" Misu shouted, activating the phase disruptor. Energy poured from both ships, 2 beams converging. At a point in the emptiness. For a moment nothing happened. Then, like a bubble bursting in reverse, light exploded outward. The darkness recoiled, contracting and then expanding in violent pulses. "It's working!" Hajun shouted over the sound of failing systems. The ship's remaining power drained into the disruptor, consoles going dark one by one. In the strange half-light of the collapsing cascade, Taewon saw Misu slumped over her station, the cold and oxygen deprivation taking their toll. Hajun fought to remain conscious. Engine power at 3%, not enough to... His voice trailed off as he too succumbed. Taewon felt the darkness closing in around his vision. With the last of his strength, he locked the disruptor on continuous discharge and sealed the command. The Pathfinder would continue its mission even after its crew could no longer guide it. As consciousness slipped away, he thought he saw the darkness outside beginning to shatter, cracks of normal space breaking through like sunlight through storm clouds. His last conscious thought was simple. We did it. Whether anyone would live to tell about it remained to be seen. A new understanding. The command center of the Araxian homeworld had been silent for 18 hours. Technicians maintained their posts, but hope had faded. All contact with the mission fleet had been lost shortly after they entered the void cascade. The enormous view screens showed only the advancing darkness, now just 22 days from reaching the homeworld. Captain Jihai Song sat alone at a monitoring station, refusing to leave despite gentle suggestions that she should rest. Dark circles under her eyes testified to her vigil. Beside her sat diplomat Tylo, who had appointed himself her unofficial companion in this watch. "They knew the risks," Tylo said gently. "They chose this path." Jihee nodded without taking her eyes from the screen. Knowing doesn't make it easier. Science Director Revenar entered the command center, his skin a muted gray of resignation. "Captain Song, the High Council requests your presence. They wish to discuss evacuation priorities." Jihai's jaw tightened. "The mission isn't over." "Captain," Revenar said with uncharacteristic gentleness, "it has been 18 hours. No ship has ever survived more than minutes within the cascade. We must be realistic." Before Jihai could respond, an alarm sounded from one of the monitoring stations. A technician called out, voice rising with excitement. "Director, we're detecting a fluctuation in the cascade's outer boundary." All eyes turned to the main view screen. The edge of the darkness that had been steadily advancing was now pulsing, contracting, and expanding like a heartbeat. "So what's happening?" demanded Revenar, hurrying to the station. The technician's 4 hands flew over the controls. "The cascade's quantum signature is destabilizing. Its coherence is dropping rapidly." Jihee was on her feet now, hope battling with caution. The disruptors. They must have reached the focal point. For tense minutes they watched as the cascade continued to pulse. Then, with shocking suddenness, it began to collapse inward, the darkness retreating from the stars it had swallowed. "They did it," Tylo whispered, his outer eyes wide with disbelief. "They actually did it." Cheers erupted throughout the command center as the cascade continued its collapse. Even Revenar's skin shifted to bright patterns of astonishment and joy. "What about the ships?" Jihai asked, leaning over the sensor station. "Any sign of survivors?" The technician's joy dimmed. "Nothing yet, Captain, but the sensors are having trouble penetrating the residual distortion field." Hours passed as the cascade continued its retreat. finally collapsing to a point and winking. Out of existence. Where once a growing void had threatened billions of lives, now stars shone again, although some would never return, consumed before the disruption took effect. Search vessels were dispatched immediately to the last known coordinates of the mission fleet. Hope was slim. The mission had been considered a one-way journey from the start. Yet Hive refused to abandon the possibility that someone might have survived. 3 days later, a search ship returned to the homeworld with news that sent ripples of astonishment through the Confederation. 3 vessels detected, the search captain reported, 2 human ships, the Pathfinder and Horizon, and 1 Araxian vessel, the Lightseeker. All have sustained critical damage. Life support systems are minimal but functioning. We've detected faint life signs aboard all 3. The survivors were brought back to the Araxian Medical Center. Of the 36 crew members who had entered the Cascade, only 11 had survived, 7 humans and 4 Araxians. All suffered from radiation exposure, oxygen deprivation, and hypothermia. Some would never fully recover. Taewon Kim was among the survivors, though he remained unconscious for days. When he finally opened his eyes, Hive was sitting beside his bed. "Did we?" he began, his voice a rasp. "You did it," she confirmed, blinking back tears. "The Cascade is gone. Billions of lives saved." A small smile touched his cracked lips before he drifted back to sleep. The Araxian High Council convened a special session once the immediate crisis had passed. Representatives from all 14 Confederation species attended, along with the human delegation and those survivors well enough to be present. High Councillor Livex's scales shimmered with formal patterns as he addressed the chamber. For 9,000 years, the Araxian Confederation has prided itself on its advancement, our technology, our logical frameworks, our ordered societies. We believed ourselves to be among the most enlightened beings in the galaxy. He paused, his gaze moving to the humans seated in places of honor. Yet when faced with extinction, our logic told us to accept the inevitable, to calculate our losses and save what we could. It was the reasonable response. Murmurs of agreement came from several counselors, and then, Livex continued, came the humans, a species barely a century into spaceflight, a species without unified consciousness, without quantum computing minds, without the benefit of millennia of accumulated knowledge. Hive shifted uncomfortably under the attention. Beside her, Taewon sat in a hover chair, still too weak to stand for long periods. "This young species showed us something we had forgotten," Livex said. "They showed us courage without certainty, sacrifice without guarantee, hope without logical foundation." The chamber was silent now, all attention on the High Councillor's words. "In our pursuit of advancement, we calculated away parts of ourselves that these humans still possess, and in our moment of greatest need, it was these qualities, not our technology, not our logic, that saved us." From the back of the chamber, an elderly voice spoke up. It was Councillor Newham of the Nor, the same who had first supported the humans' plan. "I have lived through 3 centuries," he said, his aquatic voice translated clearly. "I have seen war and peace, discovery and loss, but I have never seen courage like that displayed by these humans and the Araxians who joined them." He moved forward, his hover platform bringing him before the human delegation. "You knew you would likely die," he said simply. "Yet you went anyway. Our greatest philosophers will spend generations trying to understand this choice." In the days that followed, ceremonies were held across the Confederation. Memorials were constructed for those who had been lost. The surviving crew members were honored with the highest distinctions the Confederation could bestow. On the eve of the Earth vessel's departure, Taelo found Hive standing at a viewport watching the stars. "The Council has established a new protocol," he told her, "for any future crisis that threatens life on a massive scale. They're calling it the human response." Hive turned to him, eyebrow raised. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means that, when confronted with seemingly impossible odds, we will no longer ask only, what is the logical course, but also, what is the right course?" Taelo's 4 hands made a gesture of profound respect. "Ah, you've changed us, Captain Song. not just by saving our worlds, but by showing us a different way to see the universe. Jihai smiled slightly. We didn't do anything special. We just did what humans do. That, said Talo, is precisely what makes it special. The next morning, as the Earthships prepared to depart, a monument was unveiled in the central plaza of the Araxian capital. It depicted human and Araxian figures standing together, facing outward as if confronting an unseen threat. At its base, words were inscribed in multiple languages. When rational calculation counseled despair, human hope prevailed. When the darkness seemed unstoppable, courage found a way. As Jihai read the inscription, High Counselor Livex approached. Her, before you leave, I must ask you something that has puzzled our entire confederation, he said. Why do you think only humans answered our call? Jihai considered the question carefully. Around her, her crew was saying goodbyes to the friends they had made among the Araxians, bonds forged in crisis that would now span the stars. I think, she said finally, it's because we still remember what it's like to be afraid and alone. Our history is full of moments when survival seemed impossible, when logic said to give up. We learned that sometimes the difference between extinction and survival is just one person saying, maybe there's another way. She looked up at the towering Araxian. And we know that someday, we might be the ones sending out a desperate call. We'd hoped someone would answer. Livex's scales shifted to a pattern Jihai had never seen before. Later, Taylor would tell her it was an ancient expression, rarely used in modern times. It meant profound understanding, a new way of seeing. As the Earthships departed, messages poured in from across the Confederation, not just formal thanks from governments, but personal messages from billions of individuals whose lives would continue because a handful of humans had believed the impossible was worth attempting. Aboard the command ship, Jihai placed a hand on Taiwan's shoulder as they watched the Araxian homeworld recede. Ready to go home, she asked. He nodded, still weak but healing. Yes, but something tells me this isn't the last time humanity will be called to help. Jihai smiled. And will answer. It was a promise to the stars.